Okay, there is John. John, do you want to test your mic?
Sure.
Okay, it's perfect. Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Okay. So I guess since we have an hour, we might get going. If more people join, they'll miss the enthralling first couple of minutes while we do the administrative review. So welcome. This is the Lake meeting at IETF112. My name is Stephen Farrell, and my co-chair is Militia.
Hello.
So they've got some links if you need them. The Note Well, this is Friday of an IETF week. You've seen this a lot of times. You should be aware of it. And in addition, people like to behave well, so doing that is good. Again, if you kind of keep an eye on the code, bear in mind the code of conduct and behave appropriately. But I don't think we've had a problem in this group. So here's our agenda. Administrative, we're in the middle of that. There's an update on the kind of the way we want to try and interact with the academic cryptographic community to get kind of analysis done. Militia will cover. There's the new draft on traces that we had consensus on adopting. I think Militia and I are not entirely clear on what final destination people really want for that and our exact scope. So there's a couple of questions on that. And then they will hand over to John for handling issues with the main spec of ETH. And next steps, planning, whether we want another interim before the holidays, etc. Any agenda bashing? Take that as a no. We have a minute taker, thanks Timothy, and in Jabber, myself and Militia will keep an eye on that. So if you have audio issues, then you can feel free to type into Jabber, and we'll be able to bring your comment to the microphone. Okay, so with that, we'll move on, and Militia, over to you. I think you're going to share a screen, right? Or...
Yes, I will. So I'll just give a brief update on this. So as we agreed during the last IETF meeting, we will launch a call for formal analysis of the specification, as it is now in a pretty good shape, and we feel confident that it is ready to go. I've been working with Kartik and the co-authors of the ad hoc draft on writing up a letter or like a short paper summarizing ad hoc that would be like the first point of entry for people who were not familiar with the ad hoc standardization process, mainly targeting the crypto community. And so essentially I was hoping to have this published for today's meetings. We received some comments from Kartik that I wanted to address before putting this online. So I will just go skim through like what this is all about. This is right now like a 6-page letter in IEEE format that summarizes the protocol. It mainly, as I said, it tries in a pedagogical manner to describe the protocol, to give a summary of the different things that are relevant for security analysis. And one of the big parts there is essentially the security goals or requirements that we agreed on as the first step during the the standardization process in Lake. So these are noted here. And then, so let me take a step back. So essentially the document is split in 3 parts. First one is like the security requirements that we agreed on in the requirements draft. The second part is the protocol design, essentially introducing ad hoc to the first comers. This includes some figures on the key schedule, on the parameters that constitute an ad hoc cipher suite, and then how the different constructs in ad hoc are instantiated and how they are defined. This includes, for instance, the ad hoc exporter interface, the ad hoc key update function, etc., etc. So this is nearly done. I hope to be able to publish this on beginning next week, essentially. What is right now pending is a table that we want to where we want to summarize essentially translate between the different security goals agreed in the requirements document, and then map this to the papers that have already done some formal analysis on the specification and proved the different properties. So it is this table. So essentially, we reference here the properties that were proved and what we would like to see proven during this 6-month period that we will trigger once we agree that the specification is ready and good to go. And then, of course, there are a bunch of tables summarizing the algorithms that are used, like everything that people can find in one place, not to have to go through the different specifications in the IETF, but obviously any IETF documents have precedence if there are any inconsistencies with the document and the IETF specifications, but we make every attempt not to be any. So that would be it. As I said, I will give it a go and publish this on Open Archives during the next week, and send an email essentially to the mailing list, inviting the formal verification community to start the analysis in the following period. And we, as I said, we are doing this in coordination with Kartik, who will help us to reach the teams around the world who have expertise in this kind of studies. So that would be it on my side regarding this this item. Do we have any questions?
So yeah, I guess it's it's a good time to jump on the queue if you have questions. I have a couple.
Yes.
So I think this is great work, and it's a really good idea to try and lay it out this way that's friendly for people who want to do the work. I think that's a really good idea. I guess we should clarify. This is not a working group consensus document, right? So we don't need to.
No.
We shouldn't think about it that way. This is like an invitation to the community, to a different community, to do some work, right?
Exactly.
So I don't think we need to kind of run a call on this or whatever. But on the other hand, I think it would be useful to get to be open to modifying, producing a second version of it if there are comments from the working group.
Yeah, so my goal is essentially, I will put this online like next week, hopefully like Monday, Tuesday, and then I mean we can, as this will be published in Open Archives for the time being, we can just like iterate and.
Great, yeah. So I think that's perfect. So if we, if you guys finish this up, and I think it's a great piece of work and a really good idea, and then maybe invite people to comment on it and issue updates as clarifications are needed or whatever. That would be super.
Yep.
So my second question was, you said 6 months. How do we know that that's the right period?
So this is something we discussed, I think, during one of the previous IETF meetings. Well, I mean, this was like, we came up with 6 months as a period where, it is enough time, but.
Yeah, again, if working group participants have opinions on that, I think it'd be really good to hear them. Or if there are, if there's a workshop at a particular point in time that it's important to try and get feedback from, and that's 6.5 months or 3 months, that's useful information to have. I mean, I guess as chairs, we'll put this out there, and the suggestion is that we'll kind of wait 6 months to see what happens as a default. Hopefully something happens and then we don't have to, we can stop waiting, but so
I hope to get from Kartik like really actionable feedback from the different teams if anyone will start working on this, and as we'll try to reach out to specifically to the different individuals.
Yeah, great. So like, and Ben says in the chat that TLS and MLS have done that before, so that's fine. Those are my two questions, but again, fantastic idea and good bit of work. John.
6 months is like first shot. Then before the document processes, we always have to have a discussion. So if the working group thinks something is worth waiting for or not, we can decide that later.
Okay, so everybody seems happy with 6 months. I assume everybody is happy with the idea of this document. It seems obviously a good idea to me anyway. But if anybody has any comments, now's a good time before we move on. Okay, so we look forward to seeing the link to that, Militia, when you think it's ready, and then people can comment on it, and off it'll go into the world.
Sounds good.
It's kind of you again on the next agenda item, so.
So yes, the next agenda item is on the draft traces, I suppose. So let me just see. Okay.
Do you want to share or should I?
Ted, I already see it's loading. Yeah.
Okay, good. That was me loading it then. Okay.
Okay.
There we go. There you go.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so this is just like a brief wrap up of the adoption call we had on draft traces. Stephen, can you go to the next slide? So we launched the working group adoption call on 18th of October for 2 weeks after the initial agreement during the last interim. We got feedback from so essentially from Marco, Stefan, Sean, and John, who is also a co-author. General feedback we received is that people support adoption. There were no opinions that this should not be adopted, and people support the publication as an informational RFC. There was one remark brought up by Sean, who stressed that we really want to ensure correctness of this specification, which really makes sense by verifying the test vectors that are presented there with multiple implementations. Then one thing that is not really clear yet is on the scope of the document. So I discuss this more on the next slide. So currently, the scope of the draft is essentially the draft covers methods signature, and static with Cipher Suite 0, which is the X25519 based suite. There was interest expressed for the NIST curve P256. I think Marco and Stefan raised interest around having test vectors on Cipher Suites 2 and 3 specifically. So what we would like to hear now from the working group is, what are your opinions on this? I mean, first, if you object to this document being published as an RFC, and then second, what are your thoughts on the exact scope? Should we be exhaustive and cover each method with all the Cipher suites that are defined? So essentially we select a set of Cipher suites, like for instance, 0 and then 2, which would cover the NIST curve and the Edwards curve. Or just be selective and do with different methods, like as John proposed on the mailing list. So yeah, we are really looking to for your feedback here. Do we have any comments on this? So Timothy, yes.
So we will still have like a GitHub page where we have a lot of other test vectors. And I don't think we should be exhaustive in the draft and just have them as additional support. And then on the GitHub page, we can have much more test vectors and be much more exhaustive. But it would be difficult to have an exhaustive list of all the combinations in the draft.
Yeah, so I mean, to be clear, I mean, I was not implying that we should have like all the Cipher suites, just
no.
Yeah, so this is just.
But it's. Yeah. I think I heard this comment during the last interim, and I can't remember who said it, but it's difficult to decide like where to stop. Of course, this could be the discussion we're having right now: is what should we include and what not.
So specifically, which Cipher suites and methods would you like to see there?
I think I would have all methods and maybe Cipher Suite 0 and 2.
Okay, all methods, but does that mean each method which both Cipher Suite 0 and 2?
Yeah.
Okay, so okay, let's have that in the minutes then. Do we have any other opinions? John?
My idea would be that we have a lot of test vectors, basically no limitation in JSON format on GitHub. And then my proposal would be to select quite few for the drafts with a lot of explanations. I think if you want to check your implementation against something, you probably do that with a JSON-based test vector. If you want to understand more about why things are like they is and walk through test vectors, then you look at the draft. So I think beyond like 2-3 traces, I think there's you don't get increased understanding if with the explanations in the draft. So I think for correctness case, I would say 2 to 3 traces and focus on making these correct. There's a lot of work both to write more traces and also to check them.
So yeah, I mean, and it also reflects the comments in Jabber there. So that, you know, that sounds like a plan that people are happy with. I guess the action would be to create a place in GitHub for traces to be posted, and then to at some point select from those to which goes into the draft.
Stephen, there are already test vectors in GitHub.
Oh, okay, good. Sorry, pardon me.
And some of them are in the traces draft.
Okay, so we're inviting people to submit PRs with new ones. Is that right?
Yes, we actually have a new contributor who is going to do Cipher Suite 2 and 3, and would also become a new co-author of the traces draft.
Great.
So that's
okay.
Marek Serafin from Asabloy.
Good stuff.
Yep.
Marco, I see you're in the queue.
Yeah, hi. For the draft, I personally find ideal a compromise between what Timothy said basically and what is in the slide now as selective. So basically methods 0 and 3 for both Cipher Suite 0 and 2. But yeah, just my preference. And I'm just reiterating what I wrote to the list a few weeks ago.
But do you, Mark? Okay, yeah, Mark, would you like to see also methods 1 or 2, 1 and 2?
I think 0 and 3 can be sufficient, at least for me. I can understand someone hoping for them too.
Okay, so let's continue this discussion on the mailing list.
Okay, let's take an action on making a concrete proposal based on this input, and then get back to the mailing list with that.
Great. Okay, we're only a couple of minutes behind time, so that's pretty good. So I think we're ready to move on to the next agenda, which is John, I guess. So John, do you want to hit the share slides button? So if you hit the piece of paper thing to the left of the join the queue button, or to the right of the join the queue button, then we can give you permission to control the slide deck yourself.
I have already asked for.
Oh, there it is. Yeah, I see it now. There you go.
So,
okay, so you're running the show.
Yeah, so these are the next 3 items on the agenda. It's status, open issues, and also reviews. Thanks, Ben. So we have 5 minutes for the status. Just going through that quite quickly. All the changes from 08 to 11 was already discussed at the interim. We made an effort to try to do all technical changes until 11, so we could have up-to-date test vectors that we can implement. So there's changes to the key derivation, made a lot of simplification, also fixes. Then some changes and simplifications to the negotiation of cipher suites. Added the MAC length to the ciphers instead of relying on the cipher in the AAD. We made this combination of GUI and ciphertext 2 to match this to meet this 45-byte requirement. CWT and CCS was added. Support for these, they are named K CVT and K CCS to indicate that these are CBOR web token and CBOR claim set with a key inside them. They work like certificates. Made changes to the EAD type. There was quite a lot of restructuring and then quite a lot of fixes. So then 11 to 12, this was or has been done after the interim. There's basically clarifications. There's no technical changes that affected test vectors. So the COSI has sender parameters. We added a clarification that ad hoc does not use this, or I don't remember, but the exact language. But when you use the header parameters in ad hoc, they always identify the sender. Then there was a discussion of PQC. So it was added a clarification to the document that PQC chems could be added later to method 0. No technical change. This cannot be used straight away at the moment. Then a clarification that all COSI signatures are supported. The current plan is that the ad hoc supports all signatures from COSI. That includes hash-based, RSA, and Walnut. I don't know if anybody wants to use them, but the plan is to support all future. There's some clarification about Cipher Suite. We made updates to the Mti section. This was based on the discussion in the interim. Basically, must support KID. For the other parameters that was to do, we just added that it's up to the implementation to support whatever they want. This aligns with the other parameters of this type. Then the COSI processing was moved to an appendix to shorten the body, and then there's some internal references that was fixed. Any questions on the status? Otherwise, we move to issues. Yeah, no hands. Then, according to the agenda, we have 50 minutes for issues. I think there's 12 left. So this is a short list of all the open issues, excluding test vectors and the reviews. We have done some minor cryptographic explanations, mainly by this paper we wrote that Malaysia presented, and also some comments from implementers. Clarify that this is actually a technical change. The MAC length must be at least 8 bytes. Clarified where compact representation is used. Other clarification that the nonce also provide a binding between the key update and the message that triggered the key update, or it can do that. And then an explanation why ad hoc is not using a running hash, and the reason for that is that that's not supported on many constrained platforms. A new issue on adding privacy consideration based on the Model T discussions. And the link here is a document by Jerry Arco and Stephen Farrell. This would not be any technical changes, but considerations that if you use the same certificate to several servers or clients, they can work together and see that you connected to all of them. Then an issue 193 question about adding HPKE algorithm for method 0. As I said, there was a clarification that this could be done later. After that, there is a new draft in COSI that adds HPKE algorithms. There's the discussion in COSI whether this will just register as subset of algorithms or if it will support all future HPKE algorithms. And also a discussion whether this is the way to do key derivation in COSI in the future or if it's one way to do key derivation in the future. I think the only reason to do this now would be if COSI already now decides that HPKE is how we will use PQC chems in the future, then it would be worth adding. And this would not be, it will not change any of the current methods or test vectors. It would be GX and GY. You would put a different byte string in these when you use a PQC chem. But currently that is not specified. That would require some new draft in the future. That's probably the best thing to do with the new Cipher Suite. Then the information about non-repudiation was wrong. Said that you needed to save the ephemeral key. That's not true. You can save all the input to the signature function, and then you can prove that the other party took part in the protocol. This is similar to IKE, I think, as the information is encrypted in ad hoc. In TLS 1.2, I think the signature is, I don't, in some protocols you can prove it by just looking at the information on the wire. In ad hoc, the other party needs to save things. It's not visible from the wire. Then we have an issue about optimal padding. That's blue because I have a separate slide on that. 186 is a discussion about the EAD, internal structure, and the API. This was based from comments from implementers where this CBOR encoding should be done and how. And also a bit unclear still how other protocols will use the EAD interface. My reflection for this discussion is that we probably need to specify it as we cannot have any, we need to specify as a byte string to make sure that the data is correct CBOR. It does not affect the security of ad hoc as such, but you could imagine that some other application assumes that it actually is correct CBOR, and then it should be. But I think this needs more discussion. And there is security consideration for TOOF. Unclear is that done in ad hoc or in COSI. Too many words. There is regarding compact representation. There's a draft in CFRG that suggests that for HPKE. Don said he didn't get did not get positive feedback for that. I wasn't there when he presented, but I sent a mail to CFRG asking if there was any need to do any alignment. If CFRG thinks so, I guess we will do that. Otherwise, probably not. Then we have effect of limited randomness. There, Göran has made a PR, and it's a very short PR. It adds a reference to an appendix in OSCOR as discussed in the interim. See, then we have here's a slide about optimal padding. The issue here is that ad hoc security considerations or privacy consideration doesn't currently does not say that ad hoc reveals the length of your identity and also the length of EAD, I think. And there is an PR that I have written, 190, that adds security consideration for this, and it also adds a padding mechanism. TLS and IKE has padding mechanisms for this. Unclear how much they are used, but my proposal would be that we add this as an optional feature. You don't have to implement it if you don't want, but we can. And padding would not be needed for several of the identities. You can choose a fixed length identifier instead. But I think this is a useful feature to have, and it doesn't affect anything else. If you don't implement it, you can ignore it. Would be any comments on this before we move on to test vectors? Not reading.
I think, John, it sounds like what you think are sensible resolutions for most of these. What's the best way to close a bunch of them that we think are ready to close? Just maybe send one mail to the list with a, listing all of the issues you propose to close, and then just giving people a few days and then going ahead and doing it.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think that's the plan. So at the point you think it's best to do that in the next short while, if you send a mail to the list then saying, issue blah, proposed resolution close, and so on.
Yeah.
Give people a few days, then far ahead and do it.
Yeah. So if you have any comments on any of these issues, please please be active on GitHub or send an email to the list, of course. Good. Then there's issues about test vectors. I think these we have already discussed earlier in the meetings. At least 167, the content of the traces document. 188 is an issue about, it says missing suits are, but what is proposed is to have a list of supported Cipher suites, both in the initiator and the responder. This would be something different. Suits I and suits R only have meaning in the actual messages. They might be they might be truncated from the full list of supported ciphers. It's not completely trivial. We had this before, but that led to confusion also. But now we have simplified the Cipher suite negotiation, so it's simply more straightforward. So it's probably worth giving this a shot again and add such a list. Another consideration is whether we should add test vectors for a message flow with an error. So message 1 and then an error I don't support. I support a better Cipher suite, and then message 1, 2, 3 again. That would probably be useful, but it's also work, of course. But that would probably be good to do. Yeah. Then there's a suggestion to have a table of content in the test vector document. I don't know if it was for the traces but it should definitely be there for the JSON test vectors. There are, I don't know, probably more than 10 test vectors, and there is no information what's in them. So unless you look at the source code, so there a table illustrating that is definitely very needed, and I think we will add that. And there is more suites. I think we have already discussed that. I think everybody agrees at least that we should have the P256 ECDSA, and that's ongoing. There is test vectors coming very soon for that. I think this is the general issue about test vectors additions. 10 of the 12 things are done here. Might need to update this, but you should also have real certificates. Right now, they're just the sequence 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There should definitely be a real certificate with a real public and private key that you can test. This will also be added quite soon, I hope, in the coming months. Any questions about the issues or comments before we move on to reviews? I think we are just on time. No. So I think it was at the interim, there was a request from the chairs and also from the authors that to get people to review the document, because we feel that we are getting closer at least to the finish line. And we have gotten 4 reviews. That's excellent. And all the 4 reviews has been added as their own issues in GitHub, so it's easier to see and discuss them. I think the plan is to fix all the editorial issues in them, and then if some and as much technical things also, and if something need more discussion, then we open a new issue for that topic and maybe close the general review issue. But a big thanks to everybody that has reviewed. I think the comments are in general positive, quite a lot of small editorial things and some technical. So these discussions are only the bigger technical things that might be worth discussing. Marco is not here because I think all his comments were more editorial. I think a lot of them has already been addressed. So comments by Stefan, EAD, who is supposed to encode the code EAD, application or implementation. My high-level answer right now, I think the API needs to be changed. I think it needs to be int and byte string, and then probably the ad hoc application do a CBOR encoding of the int and the byte string. But in general, I think the ad hoc specification should not specify exactly how this API looks like. That's up for the application. Might look a bit different in different programming languages and so on. Then error handling. Stefan asked why a success error is needed. He doesn't see a use for one. He says he does a lot of logging, but he doesn't have a use. So success was a suggestion from IoT Ops. I think that was one of the clearest suggestions they had. I think if you don't want to use the success or don't want to implement the success, it's optional to implement also. So I think if you don't want to use it, you don't have to. But it was a strong suggestion from IoT Ops. My suggestion should be that we keep it in as optional. I don't really have any answer on when or exactly how you would want to use it. Then the mandatory Mti Cipher Suite. This we have discussed and agreed to discuss later. Stefan suggests that we should change the text from 0 and 2 to 0/1 and 2/3. He doesn't think it makes sense to make a difference between the truncated CCM and the full CCM. That's the only difference between these cipher suites. I think we can discuss that when we discuss the mandatory to implement cipher suite question later. That we said we do when we have a working group last call. more comments from Stefan about revocation, and then it's what you should do here and what you can do. And I think current answer is that ad hoc doesn't give much guidance regarding this. You can use, if you use X509, you can use CRL and you can use OCSP. You cannot use OCSP stapling. COSI does not support OCSP stapling at the moment. If somebody wants OCSP stapling, that was, for example, suggested by DKG during the COSI meeting, that might be a good idea to have it must staple, then we would either have to introduce it in COSI or in ad hoc. Both would be possible. But you need to have some standardized way of transporting the OCSP information. Comments by Kathleen. So Kathleen discusses comments on the IANA considerations, and she asks what documentation is required, and if we should also have specification required. This we discussed at the interim. I think I was happy, but I don't think there was a lot of comments. So this might, I think if people think we should have specification required instead, do that. Otherwise, there might be a need here to explain what documentation is required, to more guidance to the experts. And are there any questions in the chat? I have not been following that. I guess you tell me if there is.
There's some discussion about P256 versus 25519, and I guess the upshot hopefully is that I don't know, DKG, if you want to speak to it now, that's probably a good moment. If you can send audio.
Hi there. I think I can send audio. Yeah, I was just suggesting that having too many options leaves implementers in a position of having to make decisions that they generally don't know how to make. So the clearer we can give guidance, the better. It sounds from the discussion on the chat that the strongest reason for including P256 and ECDSA is hardware implementations for constrained devices that want to, that have a hardware constraint. And so maybe we could just add some guidance to the document that says, use 255.19 unless pre-existing hardware constraints force you into using ECDSA or something like that. Just as a way to, the more guidance we can give to implementers so that they don't feel like they're making choices they don't understand, the better. And having a clear reason to choose one or the other is the right way to go. Yeah,
I think there are already something similar to what you suggest that was suggested by Stephen Farrell, but I think some more guidance might be good. Might also be good to give some more explanation what the difference between different options would be. Yeah.
Guidance that explains the difference is fine, but guidance that just tells a lazy implementer what to do is probably better, because the folks in this group are going to understand the situation better than the average implementer.
I think that would be some default choices. If you're lazy, would be a good addition. I think. Let's try to add that. So moving on to Steven's comments. So first, connection identifiers, and Stephen asked that you might be able to track a client if you look at this, and he asked whether they could be derived in another way, and if this has been considered. And this has been considered. I think we have an earlier version of the draft did generate these in a random way, but then you also need to have them much longer due to collisions. So it has that was removed. Right now it's up to the client and initiator and responder to choose them in any way that party wants. So you can implement any way, but they're not hidden in any way. They're sent in clear text. Do you want to add anything, Stephen?
Yeah, and again, I'm not entirely sure what the potential value here might be, because connection identifiers could be, or a connection could be obvious to somebody looking at the traffic anyway.
Yeah.
However, we do have the issue with threats, like if you have a light switch that's activated when a person enters a room, just being able to detect that the packet comes from that light switch is probably revealing, regardless of any encryption. And if my concern is that these connection identifiers, if they kind of leak over to something else, into other protocols, like, and if there's some kind of proxying going on or multiplexing, then these could allow that kind of attack to happen if somebody only has visibility of the link where the multiplexed packets from many switches, for example, are being sent. So yeah. I'm not sure if doing better with connection identifiers in ad hoc would enable a good solution for that, or would be window dressing. But I think it's a concern if you can just correlate the key exchange with all the later packets. That enables some threat.
Yeah, right now the idea is to use the same identifier in ad hoc as in OSCORE. So you would be able to see that it's the same client sending these things. Typically, you would be able to do that anyway from the lower layers. But I don't know. Two options here. Maybe there are more guidance or considerations to add, and maybe there's something smart we can do technically. Would be happy to see any contribution on that. So, but
and I think the answer probably also depends on how likely we think a configuration would be where changing makes a difference. So as you say, if you can always tell from a MAC address which packets come from which light switch,
yeah,
changing the connection ID wouldn't make much difference. But if we do think that links on which packets will be multiplexed from many devices will be common, then the connection identifier would be what's allowing an attacker to identify the traffic as being from one specific source.
Yeah.
And that seems undesirable, but but I personally just don't know what the common topologies for deployments might be like.
No, I think, I guess a common deployment would be that you it's very visible and you don't really change who you talk to, and you stay in the home where you were deployed or the industry where you were deployed. But it might not be. I think there's definitely would be good with some more consideration to spell out that if you use the same connection identifier in different places, for example, you can be tracked, and then the simple solution would be to run ad hoc again if you change, like if you change your access network, for example, and negotiate a new connection identifier. Then you cannot trace the client between these two networks.
Yeah, that's true, and definitely worth pointing out. I guess though, I have heard a number of times people saying that they only want to do the expensive protocol like ad hoc very rarely, and that might be just when you unbox a device or after a power cut or something. So it's a concern. Again, maybe if it doesn't resonate with people, that's fine. If people think it's worth addressing one way or another, that's also fine. But I mean, I suppose the other argument I'd make for trying to think about this now is that it's not something that we'd find easy to change if we decided we wanted something else later. I think that's true, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. So I think for now, at least add consideration, and then I don't know. It would be very happy if somebody have some. If you have some ideas technically how to make things better, please be active on GitHub.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah.
Personally, I mean, I think when I was looking at this, I thought you could maybe come up with a scheme where you send an identifier in the first message, and then have a way of deriving a more stable identifier from that, but that you only need this visible identifier in one single message, and the rest of them could be derived. I think that should be possible to do it, but yes, having a concrete proposal seems an entirely reasonable request.
Yeah, it's definitely possible. I guess it's very simple is to derive something long and random. It will not collide with anything. If you want something shorter, it probably requires some more thinking.
Right, and without consuming more bytes in the original handshake, pretty much.
Yeah.
So there's, yeah, I'll have a look, but if other folks were willing to make a concrete proposal, if they also have this concern, I think that would be great.
Yeah, sounds great. Then terminology. Stephen asked if CDDL or English language is normative. There's a mixture. I think the answer is that there probably needs to be a mixture. I think, but it's not clear. I think it needs some clarification. I think all the CDDL is normative, but just the CDDL is not enough. You need some normative English text to tell you the details of how the fields inside the CDDL is structured. Not some things you could do with more CDDL, but I don't think you can get away with only CDDL, and it would make the CDDL very much more complex and hard to understand also. But I think that the CDL is what is normative. Clarification of what is normative is probably missing. Then more comments by Stephen. Comments if do we really need to support hash-based SIGs? We talked about that before. My idea would be that we support everything that COSI supports. Doc then also supports, for example, Walnut DSA, which is not recommended, and RSA, which would be very large. But hash-based will also be large. I guess the change in the recent version is that there was questions of PQC, and we added a note that hash-based SIGs can be used. Do you have any comments, Stephen?
I think, yeah, I agree with you that they're unlikely to be interesting, but they do have a different property of being stateful, that you only get so many signatures. And in the context of long-lived devices, that if some device is long-lived and does ad hoc frequently, then you might run into an issue. But it seems unlikely, but it also seems a bit unrealistic to claim it's really supported. But anyway, Ben, you're in the queue.
I just wanted to respond to one of the things that John said live, which was, I think, that we sort of assume that ad hoc is going to support everything that COSI supports, and I'm not sure we should make that assumption. Like, from the COSI perspective, at least my understanding is that when you have an application that uses Cozy, you're sort of assumed, like the Cozy authors are sort of assuming that your application will be profiling things down and that there may be some algorithms in Cozy that just don't make sense for you. And so we probably don't want to assume that anything that has a code point in Cozy is going to make sense for ad hoc. That's a slightly different question from the specific question of whether or not hash-based SIGs make sense for ad hoc. But I just wanted to toss that out there, that we probably do want to filter what's available from Cozy down to what makes sense for ad hoc.
Yeah, I think it's hard to filter out. There's one thing to filter what is currently specified without filtering out future algorithms that would make sense to support.
That's true, yeah. So we have to be careful about how we write this sort of guidance to be future compatible. Thanks.
Good. Then 8.7, discussion about using KDF to derive public output. I think that should be added a consideration regarding that. I think NIST has very strict rules regarding this, but I also seen a paper by Kravchuk where he says that very much complains about this NIST requirement and says it doesn't make any sense unless NIST have very, very low trust in their cryptographic constructions. But I think it depends on how much public information you derive. But I think some considerations on this could be good along the line that Stephen suggests. Might make even more sense for the exporter, where you might export much more material and it's unclear how you use them. I think that was the last slide. I think I'm out of time also.
Great, thanks. I don't know, Militia, I think, was having some audio issues. I'm not sure if they're sorted or.
It should be good now. It's
that's working now. Okay.
Yeah, sorry about that. But yeah, thank you, John. So we only have 3 minutes to go. So let's maybe just briefly discuss the next step, Stephen. I guess having an interim in the next couple of weeks before the Christmas holidays would make sense. Does the group have opinion on this?
Yeah, so that, I think opinions on that would be welcome also, but I'm assuming the answer will probably be yes, because people always like interims. But I think also to be useful to get opinions from those who are not authors about whether they think we should begin to think about a working group last call. Because I know the authors are keen that we start doing along that line. So I'd be keen to have input from other participants on the now or on the working group list, as to where they think we should be heading towards working group last call soon, because we are getting close, I think. So
yeah, and based on the reviews that we received, it seemed as we could do such a thing, right? I mean, we did not receive only editorial issues, but not only substantial changes.
Sure, but now we did have to wring promises to do reviews out of people at the last interim, though, so we kind of semi-forced them a bit, but that's okay. Again, if there's other people who haven't expressed an opinion yet about how close they think we should be to the working group last call, that would be useful input. I know the authors and the team essentially behind that are keen that we start a working group last call soon. So if you have opinions, now's a good time, or on the mailing list if now is not a good time for you. People don't seem to be joining the queue.
So there is Joran.
Joran, go ahead.
No, I don't have a strong opinion here. I think that this is great that we got these reviews. Thank you very much, everyone, for contributing, and we have had a good discussion today. I think I would imagine that this would trigger even more reviews if we do the working group last call in January, or yeah, something like that. So that would be a way of pending the potential crypto reviews, or I mean, we know that there will be some crypto reviews coming up, to get some input in the meanwhile, which probably won't be overlapping with the crypto review, I think, if we ask.
Yeah, and I mean, there's if we assume that other cryptographers are going to spend effort on this, we kind of owe it to them not to keep changing the thing during that period. So that's another reason to have a relatively stable draft for that period. So I like the way you implicitly suggested we do working group last call in January. So that's that was nicely snuck in there. I'm guessing that's the kind of thing that seems to make sense. If we have an interim before the holidays, try and tie down to as few open issues as possible, and then kick off a working group last call. That would seem to me like a sensible plan. But we could do, we'd be happy to get comments and input on that. I guess we're out of time, so send those comments to the list, unless you want to jump into the Jabber room where it'll still be recorded. Thanks for your time. I guess we'll schedule an interim for sometime in early mid-December.
Yep.
But we'll discuss the list. Thank you all.
Thank you all.
And thanks to Timothy for taking good notes. That's great.